أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأزواجه وذرياته وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, you are here with Ustad Divina Kanani. Alhamdulillah, and this is the homeschooling show. So, Alhamdulillah, this is our last episode. Alhamdulillah, it feels incredibly blessed, Alhamdulillah, to have been able to put on this show for you all. And I pray that anyone who has been listening has benefited greatly, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, and all that benefit comes straight from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't take any credit for that whatsoever. Alhamdulillah, Allah has just allowed me to be a facilitator of the khair that people have gotten from this show. Alhamdulillah. Now, one thing I wanted to say, because it is our last show, I hope that inshallah you can reach out to me at any time if you have any questions regarding homeschooling in general, whether you're from the UK, from Leicester, or you're from other parts of the UK or other parts of the world. Alhamdulillah, I am trying my best to facilitate as much as possible, help guide people, help be there, help be just, a shoulder to cry on if you're struggling, try to pinpoint you in the right direction if you are trying this journey. Alhamdulillah. Now, of course, we've mentioned this many times in other shows that homeschooling is not necessarily right for every family. Sometimes, you might find families start with homeschooling and then end in school, and some families, start with school and end in homeschooling. So it's not a one size fits all solution, and it's not something that every family, like I mentioned, is able to do. But alhamdulillah, hopefully this show and maybe some more things that I can do over the next year can be beneficial for us as prospective homeschoolers, as veteran homeschoolers, inshallah. We all kind of are in our positions in life and we just kind of go with it. Alhamdulillah. Now, in our previous shows, we've spoken about some really amazing topics. We've spoken about the differences between homeschooling and schooling, why homeschoolers find homeschooling beneficial, the process of deregistration, the process of finding the nature of your child. We've talked about homeschooling across different ages. We've also spoken about the entirety of the journey of homeschooling. We spoke about online schools. We spoke about tuition, tutors. We've spoken a lot about all these different kinds of topics. So alhamdulillah, if you do want to go and check any of these out, they're on the Ramadan Radio YouTube channel, alhamdulillah. And if you do ever want to reach out to me personally, you can do that in two ways. So you can do that either by my Instagram, alhamdulillah, which is Divina, Davina.Kanani, Kanani. You can reach out to me on my personal Instagram, or you can reach out to me on our institution Instagram, which is Medina, Madina Institute, so INSTITUTE, Leicester. Alhamdulillah, Medina Institute Leicester. That's the institution that I work with and that I work for, alhamdulillah. And we do a lot of great homeschooling events and activities. We actually do a monthly meeting as well, alhamdulillah, which I would like to put online as well. So inshallah, bi'idhnillah, for our meetings coming up in the new year, they'll be broadcasted online so sisters can benefit online too, inshallah. Now, alhamdulillah, incredibly blessed today to be joined here on my program, alhamdulillah, not in person, but online, alhamdulillah, by an incredible woman, inshallah, mashallah, who has been personally incredibly inspirational to me and to my journey with my children in the Quran, especially, and with hifz, and just kind of being more proactive with this. Now, before I introduce my lovely guest, mashallah, Allahumma barik, I just want to give you the ability to phone in with any questions, comments, concerns, anything you'd like to say. So you can either phone in or you can drop us a text or a WhatsApp. So the numbers to phone in are 0116 482 2086. If you want to drop us a text or a WhatsApp, you can do that on 077 488 55055. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, alhamdulillah, so you can drop us a comment on there if you're listening on there, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, our guest is a beautiful sister named Anjem. Alhamdulillah, she runs an Instagram account called Teaching Two Little Kids, and alhamdulillah, that's right, Anjem, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay, alhamdulillah. And she runs a do I want to say a business, a company, like an initiative called Hands on Quran. Mashallah, Mama Barak, she's got some great resources out there for anyone who is teaching their children Quran, whether it be hifz or it be otherwise. Alhamdulillah, I myself am, looking forward to receiving some of my products that I have purchased. Alhamdulillah, nothing for free here. I'm always interested in supporting businesses. Alhamdulillah, myself. So Alhamdulillah, super excited to receive those things, and I have benefited so much from her great posts on social media. It's always been incredibly inspirational, motivational for me as a mother, teaching my children about the Quran, teaching them Quran. And so I wanted to bring Sister Anjum on here, inshallah, to help anybody who's struggling and to hopefully get some tips and tricks from her, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. So, assalamu alaikum, Sister Anjum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan so much for joining us. Do you want to give us a little introduction as to
who you are and how you got started with all of this?
Yes, I will. I can't really do better than what you've just done. That was an amazing introduction. May Allah make me better than what you think of me.
All of us.
I have as you mentioned, I have an Instagram account, which is Teaching Two Little Kids. And in fact, it did not even start off as a business. It just started off as me sharing ways I was teaching my child at that time, who was about 3.5, 4 years old, Arabic. And through a very non-conventional way. So it wasn't sitting down and reading from a book and learning Arabic like that. It was very hands-on, very playful. And then he actually finished his Arabic very, very early on. So he was probably around just before he turned 4, he finished reading like his qaida, like cover to cover. We did follow a qaida as well, but as in he finished all his Arabic rules to learn how to read Arabic. And then I was thinking to myself, oh, I can't just hand this tiny little, and he was tiny like in age and in size, this tiny little child a physical Quran, because it was quite overwhelming for him to just read Arabic words from a page. So I created my own products, and that's how Hands-on Quran was created, where I created a product called the Surah Strips, where you can read each ayah of a surah from Juz Amma, ayah by ayah. So you're focusing on one particular section, and once you've mastered it through reading or memorizing, then you can move on. So that's how Hands-on Quran was created. That was my first product. And since then, I have just been creating, I guess, innovative and hands-on Quran products for children and adults as well. I myself use one, and I know you've ordered a few for yourself. Alhamdulillah. So basically, I just share on my Instagram, I just share ways that my children learn how to read Arabic, how my children learn how to read and memorize the Quran. And I then share easy, actionable steps that you can teach your own child, regardless of where you are as a parent in your own journey, whether you know how to read Arabic, whether you know how to read Quran, whether you're non-native or anything like that. So that's how that's basically where I'm going with my account. So teaching children and empowering Muslim mothers at the same time.
Honestly, that's one of my favorite things about your account, mashallah, is you're incredibly practical. And I think this is something that I struggled with a lot, especially at the beginning of the journey. I'm a convert to Islam. So for me, I have no experience whatsoever on how to teach a child qaida, Quran, anything like that. And I think there's a lot of sisters who maybe didn't go through the madrasa system. And so they are also in that kind of boat. And so for me, I was always kind of under this impression that I needed to be like a madrasa in order to teach my children Quran, but actually it's way more easier than that. It's not necessarily for me. I've found that your account has just given me so many practical tips. One thing that you did the other day, you posted on your story, which, you know, subhanAllah, for me, that was just like, oh my goodness, how come I'm not doing this? It was that you were walking with I think it might have been your daughter. Was it your daughter? You were walking with her to school, and you were reciting a portion of Quran. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, how come I'm not doing that while I'm walking somewhere with my kids? Like if I'm in the park and there's no one around, why don't I just recite with them? Why don't I just, I used to do this a lot more often than I do now. Maybe when they're a bit younger, it's a bit more fun for them. Now they're slightly older. I feel like maybe I'm taking the fun out of it myself. And not doing it as, often and as practically as I could be doing. So that actually really inspired me to get back out there, just reciting Quran whenever I'm able to with them, just to get them to be exposed to it as well. And for them to not feel shy about reciting Quran. one thing that, you know, my daughter loves is she loves the nasheed, that is animals love Quran.
Yeah.
And she loves that nasheed. But then I realized that when we would see animals out and about, she wouldn't be confident to recite Quran because she's never seen me do that. She's never seen me recite Quran to like an animal or to somebody outside of the house. So when I started, there was a cat and I recited some Quran to the cat and it became very friendly. And that's when they kind of were like, oh, okay, it's okay for me to recite Quran to a cat or to a bird or something like that. And so I realized that I am the one who's kind of setting the example for them. And I need to be a lot more open to other ways of teaching them Quran. Now, alhamdulillah, one question I wanted to ask you, which I think is really important for many of our listeners, is just kind of what's your best advice to people who are kind of starting off this journey? You mentioned your journey with your son about the qaida and how you started off with the surah strips. But do you, as a mother, do you have any advice for any sisters who are starting off on this journey?
Okay, Bismillah. I just say, I think you should just start, because firstly, I think we let our own fears as parents, because of something we don't know, stop us. But really, we don't understand that our children they will take to it. So I use my own anxiety sometimes. And for example, when my son started memorizing Quran, I thought, oh my God, this surah is too long, I can't start it. And then I started, and he took to it really, really well. And that was my own mistake. Like I let my own fears stop me from letting him progress in his Quran. But first and foremost, obviously, and I think this goes without saying, just make dua. You always make dua that Allah helps you, He guides you, and He makes it easy for you. And then you just start. If you start messy, that's completely okay. You don't have to have excellent tajweed. You don't have to have memorized Quran yourself. I think you should just start. And
Sorry, give me 1 second. Brothers, can you please put a timer on? Because I don't know how long I've got. Sorry. I was trying to get their attention very subtly, but it wasn't working. So now I've had to just kind of go for that. Keep going. Bismillah.
that's fine. And I was just going to say that I think sometimes we just overthink all of this, and we have all these niggling thoughts that, oh my God, my child isn't ready, or they're too young. But really, it's us. It's us that, we are letting our own fears stop us. And of course, in an ideal world, I think, having your child being able to read Arabic and then go on to memorize Quran, amazing. That's great. Yeah. But then you don't realize that you might have a child that doesn't like to read, but does like to memorize the Quran. And I have two of those kids. My eldest learned how to read Arabic first, and then he went on to memorize the Quran, even though he could memorize through listening. But my daughter, I don't know what it is. She just does not want to learn Arabic. I just don't know what it is. But she wants to memorize Quran. And alhamdulillah, she, like you said, she's memorized Quran just through listening. So I think that's something that we don't realize that our children are able to do, especially if they are young. So a lot of what I try to help parents with is the early years. So I know someone has just approached me today saying, how can I help my 11-year-old? And I feel a bit hesitant replying to that, because my plan is, like, my goal of my brand and what I do here to empower parents is trying to encourage them to help their children learn the Quran from a very young age, because that's the years when they can memorize faster, they can retain things faster, and they'll enjoy it then as they get older. So that was just one of my advice. This is basically first make dua, and just figure out how your child likes to learn, whether it's through listening, whether it's through reading, and just start off small. Start off with like 1 or 2 lines, really, really short surahs, and then see how you get on.
Alhamdulillah. No, fantastic advice. It makes so much sense to firstly start with dua, because in reality, we need to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us success in whatever we're doing. And especially if we want to connect our children with the Quran, it's only from Allah, right? This is only going to come from Allah, them being connected in whatever way we can facilitate. But that only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just going to quickly plug again. Anybody who wants to get in touch with us here in the studio, please do on 0116 482 2086. Or if you want to drop any questions, comments, concerns, you can do that on WhatsApp or text on the number is 077 488 55055. So alhamdulillah, one thing that I love that you said is that, and we talked about this a little bit in some other previous shows, was that, you know, one of the beautiful things about our children is that they are different. And so they learn differently. And to hone in on that as a mother, I think is really one of the first steps to teaching, whether it be Quran, whether it be anything else, is really understanding how they as a child learn. Like if I look at my own kids, my oldest, you know, mashallah, she's, you know, struggled a bit with Arabic, and she kind of has, you know, gone on and off the wagon quite a few times. And now, mashallah, alhamdulillah, she's you know, she's reading Arabic and she's fine. But then my middle child, she is incredibly just determined. She just wants to learn to read, and she just sits down and she'll do it with you, and she has no, there's no qualms about her. You know, she wants to learn how to do it. She will do it, you know, and she's very determined. My oldest, she memorized a lot from like her father being in a position where he was memorizing, and so she would listen and she would just listen, and that's kind of how she's memorized. Whereas my second, it was a little bit more formal, a little bit more like I would sit down with her and help her memorize. But then as her sister has gone on to learn more Quran, she is actually learning Quran from her sister too, just from listening to her. You know, and so I think you're right when we say that, you know, just by starting and figuring out how your child can connect with the Quran is one of the first steps, alhamdulillah. And connecting them with the Quran in the early years is truly what will help set them up for life. You know, we say, many psychologists now say we've got about 14 years before the children go off and start learning about their own stuff and doing their own things, right? So 14 years is really, if you think about it in somebody's lifetime, it's really a small portion of their life that is, you know, a time in which they can truly absorb and connect and, you know, have a deeper connection. And the Quran is one of the best things for them to be connected to deeply. And starting that off early, even if that means that you take it slowly, it's better to do that if you can do that, rather than just trying to postpone until they get much older.
I agree with that. And also I want to add that the earlier you start, the less it feels like a burden as well. Like imagine trying to get like a child, you're sending them to madrasa at the age of 7 or 8, and that's like the first time they've had interaction with the Quran, and you may be sending them to a madrasa that is quite traditional, and for them they might not see it. And for example, my children go to a very play-based school, and they learn everything like the ABCs and the maths and all of that through play. Now if I'm now then sending them to a very traditional madrasa where they're just sitting and they're learning, they are not going to have that same kind of excitement to learn the Quran as they do with whatever they're learning at school. So it's just that it's also living here in the West as well. Our kids are learning things in a very interactive way. And for me, it was just like a no-brainer that I had to replicate that. But also my eldest, obviously he was my first, and I thought he had to learn the traditional workbook way. It took a lot of unlearning. It took a lot for me to just sit down and, you know, create interactive ways for him to learn. I didn't teach him how to write Arabic. I taught him how to read Arabic through play, through flashcards, through movable alphabets, all that sort of stuff. And then I had to teach him Quran in a similar way. I do want to add that caveat that he was very young when he started reading the Quran, and that's why I had to do it like that. And it's a similar approach I've taken with my daughter, that she's quite young. She's only 5 years old and she's memorizing Quran, and she started when she was 4.5. And in order for her to memorize the Quran, I've had to make it fun for her. I recite to her, she recites back to me, and it's very different for her because she has this emotional, sentimental connection, because it's for her, it's hearing me recite the Quran, whereas my son listens to a sheikh on his Quran pen and he recites and memorizes that way. So this is why as parents I say it's very simple. It's very simple. It's as simple as just putting on the Quran on a speaker or on your phone or in the car, or wherever you're on different journeys, having interactive tools around. Like I also have a 3-year-old niece who can memorize really fast as well, and she can listen to something like the 99 names of Allah and she can just memorize it, and she doesn't need to see you memorizing the Quran for her to want to do it. We have so many tools at our disposal, and it's just, you know, prioritizing what's important
and
in
putting
a
it into
Muslim
practice.
household.
Yeah. using the tools and in practice. I think that's another thing, is that we have so many things at our disposal, but it's just about figuring out what works for you as a family and for each child, and putting that into practice. Subhanallah. And one thing that you said there, which I think I really love, is the fact that sometimes they don't even know that they're memorizing Quran. Sometimes they don't even, it's not even like a conscious awareness that they're memorizing Quran, right? And it's just that exposure, and they actually find that it's much easier to then reiterate when they've been exposed to it. So I think for me, it's always been, just exposing them to the Quran, whether it's me reciting, whether it's, listening to the recitation, and also just, making that something normal, right? I think this is
Exactly.
another thing that is like, it's
Quote
not,
unquote normalize. This is like
yeah.
my buzzword of my Instagram page. It's
And
all
that's why I
about
love your
normalizing
Instagram
Quran,
page. It's so useful and helpful, because it is just normalizing this connection, right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So for me, like, I wanted to ask you, like, you mentioned a little bit about how the difference with the children kind of came into play with how you taught them. But like for me, I always ask this question, because I feel like sometimes, the journey to teaching Quran can be a little bit negative. And sometimes we have negative experiences with the children. Like, for example, when our iman is low, when our connection with the Quran is low, we find it difficult. Maybe we need to find more inspiration, maybe more motivation. What is your experience with that, and how have you avoided that?
So like, oh, this is quite a tough one because I'm quite a shouty parent, and I'm not a very gentle parent. But when it comes to the Quran, because my son has been doing it for quite a while now, Alhamdulillah, like I can explain to him the benefits and the rewards of reciting and memorizing the Quran, and how this sacrifice, even if you are playing, for example, and you're playing a toy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I said, if you give up something good for something even better, the reward is much greater. And don't get me wrong, my son is your typical 8-year-old boy. He does resist, he does get annoyed, he does moan and things like that. But what I've noticed in him is that once he does his Quran, and I think a lot of people have noticed it as well, that once he does his Quran, he comes out and like he enjoys the process in his Quran. He's not the type of person, mashallah tabarakallah, that will go and then I can't trust him not to do his Quran. Like he will go, and he's quite independent like that. Also, I reward my children for these milestones that they achieve. So obviously when he was younger, he was getting rewarded a lot more for smaller milestones. But as he's got older, he gets, for example, if he completes memorization of one page, he gets a certain gift. And if he memorizes a surah or a juz, those are bigger milestones. He gets a different gift. And also as watching TV and playing PlayStation and all of that sort of stuff is not a given. It's not something that they get to do just because they've come home and they get to do it. Okay, TV aside, because obviously we've got younger kids that do watch it. But for example, PlayStation. So if he wants to earn PlayStation, he needs to do his Quran. And I do reward that. I wouldn't say I take it away from him, but if he doesn't do his Quran, and whether he doesn't do it on time or whether he doesn't do the portion that he's been allocated, then he loses the chance to earn something. So that I wouldn't equate that to me punishing him. It's more that because this isn't a given, you don't get to earn it.
Yeah,
So
I think there's a
it's
difference
your
between
choice.
punishment and privilege. This is
Yeah.
what I try to put in my house.
And that's why I try to say, like, yeah, do I get annoyed? And like any other parent, I get annoyed when he resists, because you're probably also at the end of your tether as well, and you're probably really annoyed with whatever else. But it's something that he needs to know, that you're not always going to enjoy acts of ibadah that you do. Like and that's me talking as an adult. Like sometimes you're not going to want to pray your salah, but you know that it's fard upon you, at least not on him, but as an adult, but you do it because you do it for the sake of Allah. And I think even though I remind him why he does it, I think I need to constantly remind him that it is for the sake of Allah. And obviously he does get rewarded, so he can see the immediate gratification, and he can also see the delayed gratification side of reading and memorizing the Quran.
Alhamdulillah. No, it's really great. And it's handy to know that that's an okay part of the journey. I think a lot of people seem to think that, rewarding them for Quran is something that you shouldn't do or you don't need to do. I think that that's wrong. I think that every good thing should be rewarded. And I think if they learn this when they're younger, then they will understand it as they get older. And that's my own perspective. That's also something I feel like as a child, I understood that as well, that when you do something good, you are rewarded for it. And then as you grow older, that sense of gratification comes more from understanding the reward
What
Allah
intrinsic,
subhanahu wa
yeah.
ta'ala is going to give you. So it's kind of like as a child, you do it just because of the fact that, oh, I'm going to get a chocolate, I'm going to get a toy, I'm going to get a this. But then eventually, as you grow and these things become less and less important, you start to replace those things with what is important, right? The rewards from Allah, the promise of Jannah, the promise of ease, the promise of, barakah, all these kinds of things. And so I feel like with children, it is important to reward them. And I wanted to just mention this as well, because you mentioned about punishment. For me, I think I always try to remind my children that it's not punishment, it's privilege. So the things that we give you on a daily basis, everything you have on a daily basis, that is all part of us looking after you. Anything additional to that is a privilege. So anything that you earn, any toys you have, any food you have that is outside of what we give you, and you have earned, that is a privilege to have. And we don't take anything away from you for not earning that. Does that kind of make sense? That's the way I look at it in my family. Is that, if you earn something, that's your privilege. That's something that you're privileged to because you've earned that privilege. But if you don't earn the privilege, that's okay. No one's going to take anything away from you, but you're just not going to get that privilege. I do that with the TV in my house, because I don't actually have a physical TV. I just have a projector. So in order to put the projector on and everything, it's a bit of a faff. So like I have like a rule in my house that, okay, 2 consecutive days of doing Quran, like you finish your muraji'ah, you finish, the surah you're working on. And then, inshallah, you finish all the other things that we ask you to do. They have one chore in the house every day, making sure that they keep their space tidy, etc. And then TV will come, So for me, it's like, it's a privilege to give this to you, and you've earned this privilege, and I'm not going to punish you if you don't do it, but I'm not also going to give you the privilege just because, right?
Exactly.
You have to earn that privilege.
I agree with that. And especially when I know there's something that my son really, really wants as well. For example, now that he's really into playing on his PlayStation, it's something that I really dislike at the same time. But because obviously he's at that age and he's going to want to do it, I do what you do. I add a few extra things. Like, not only do you need to recite Quran, but you need to recite it on time, and you need to not let me ask you multiple times for you to do it. Because I think you're right. They need to understand the value of it. And I also remind him that it's an absolute honor. It's an honor and a privilege to memorize the Quran. Like, Allah chose you to memorize the Quran. There are children your age that are not memorizing the Quran for whatever reason. And I think, I don't know what it is, but I do feel like he does understand. He does understand.
I'll read that question out in a second, don't worry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't really, it just popped.
No, that's fine. I know it can be distracting. No, alhamdulillah. Keep going if you remember.
No, alhamdulillah. Like, it's easier. I think he understands it now, and it has come with time. I think if he had just started that now, it would have been really difficult for me to try and put these measures in place or these rules in place. But because we've been doing it for quite a few years now, it's I feel like it's all naturally come into place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, it kind of just fits together as a puzzle, right? Alhamdulillah. I'm going to read this question now. So we got a question, alhamdulillah. So the question is, how would you motivate a child to continue to memorize Quran if they are having difficulty, and any tips to help overcome that difficulty? Now, I'm going to give my answer to this, and then Anjum, I'm going to pass it over to you, inshallah. So my answer to this is, one, I would think to myself, what is the reason for the difficulty? I would try to get to the bottom of what the difficulty is, especially if it's something that I can help solve. Now, if it's not something I can help solve, like for example, if it's a disconnect with the Quran, a disconnect with understanding why we memorize Quran, if there's a disconnect between me and my child, for example, maybe we've been just having a lot of issues, me and them, and I need to work on that relationship a bit more for them to listen and comprehend that Quran is important for us. that the memorization should continue, then those kinds of things I would try to facilitate. I would try to work on, try to make sure that I have that good connection with my child. So when we do look at Quran and memorization, that they will listen to me, that they, they would understand that we do it out of love for Allah. We do it for all the great rewards and blessings that we can get from memorizing Quran. Now, if there's something that I can't overcome and it's just like a lack of motivation, which happens with all of us, it does. Wallahi, we have to be real that even as adults, we lack motivation. What I would try my best to do is just continuously implement a good routine and be consistent as much as possible, even if it's resisting, even if there is resistance there. I would try my best to encourage and keep on going. And again, like Sister Anjum said, go back to dua. Go back to your dua with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and open this dialogue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because only through Him can these kinds of things be facilitated. Alhamdulillah, I'm going to let Sister Anjum take this question now, inshallah. Bismillah.
I don't think I could add more to what you've just said. I think that's exactly how I would have answered it. At first, I would have said turn to Allah. Just make dua that Allah can help you and aid you, and you need to get to the root of the problem of why your child is struggling. Could it be because they can't read could it be of some sort of learning difficulties that you are not also aware of as well? And I can't really answer on that because I don't really have much experience in that area. But it's also trying to figure out different ways of approaching hifz. So if one way isn't working, have you tried a different way of approaching it? If, for example, like I mentioned before, my daughter, she can't read Arabic, but she wants to memorize the Quran, and I didn't want to stop her from memorizing the Quran because she can't read. So then we've tried it through listening, and there is obviously a downside to that, is when I ask her to go find the surah in her Juz Amma, she doesn't know where it is because she doesn't know what it looks like. But it's not a barrier as such, it's just a different way, and we're just going to have to basically go with the flow. That's how I see it. But I don't think I could really add on to more to what you already said.
So I think I think the person who's asked the question has just said the clarification on the problem is confusing
surahs
if they have similar ayats.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming so. So for me, my daughter had this issue when it came to, like, for example, Surah Shams and Surah Layl, right? They come one after the other and they are quite similar. There are many times, and the difference is that Shams has the extra ha on every single on every ayah, right? And not every ayah, but on the ayahs that end very similarly to Surah Layl. So for me, what it was just continuously repetition, that these are two separate surahs, and separating them as well, and their separation on learning. So because they come on the same page, when a child finishes a whole page, for me, what happens is sometimes that entire page gets all jumbled because they've memorized the whole page, but then now they can't remember necessarily where they've memorized and where something is coming. And especially if it's a child who can't read the Arabic, you need to be just more aware of separating these two surahs. Now, one thing that Sister Anjum really helped me with, and this was, with her surah strips, was about, getting them to, for me, with my girls, it was about getting them to lay them out, like, and say, this is this surah and this is this surah. Right? And so they understood that, okay, these ayat are part of this one surah, and these ayat are part of this surah, and just continuously practicing this. Okay, this is how Surah Shams sounds. So playing Surah Shams, okay, we got Surah Shams, we understand it, we got that surah is down. Now let's go to Surah Layl. So completing one in its entirety and making sure that is in their brain. Like, so if they're getting confused, don't go through the whole page. Go through it again, ayah by ayah. Sometimes we forget that, just like us as adults, there are times when our minds get very jumbled, and we've got so much going on. It could have been just a very stressful time when they were learning these surahs, and maybe for them going back to these surahs is maybe a little bit traumatic, right? Maybe there was so much stress happening at that time that they're confused now. So go back and go to a calmer place. Get them to have better memories with memorizing these surahs, and inshallah bi'idhnillah, it will fall into place. Any other things to add on to that, Sister Anjum?
Yeah, so to add to that, I would say, and that's why and I'm not plugging this because we don't have any more left in stock anyway, the surah strip. But that's why the surah strips were also created, because it helps map the Quran in your brain, in your map. So if you are looking at it, and I always ensure that my children So the way my son revises his Quran or whatever he's memorized previously, he has to do a portion of it through looking, as in looking and reading. And that obviously helps map those ayahs in your brain. And that's why the surah strips help in that way as well, because there's a color pattern, there's the name of the surah, and then you'll figure it out like that. And I agree with you, complete a surah in its entirety and then move on. It does help for looking, and if you're a non-Arab or you don't understand Arabic, I look for patterns. So I look at how each ayah ends, like you said as well. And I have that same problem as an adult. Like I make mistakes in 2 surahs, the way they end. And my teacher, just to make it easy for me, she just said, look at the way the ayah before ends. It's the same throughout. And that's how I remembered it. It's just someone can just say something to you and it can stick in your mind. And then that's how you will know. So I agree with you. Constantly repetition. Like memorizing the Quran is easy. It's retaining it that is the hardest. And as we go on to memorize more and more Quran, there are more chances of you making these kind of mistakes. So having a solid, memorizing it, a surah completely, looking for patterns. If you need to write it out, write it out. I highly recommend writing out any ayahs, especially that you are struggling with, because again, whatever you write, your mind remembers. So the more you write it out, and also there's a saying where you're 7 times more likely to remember something if you write it out.
Yeah.
So again, write it out and look into meanings and understanding of that surah if they are of that age where you can have that kind of conversation with them as well. And just be patient as well, because my daughter's been saying this word wrong for like the last week in the surah that she's memorizing. And then one day I know it's going to click. I keep correcting her. I gradually correct her, but inshallah, one day I know she's going to get it. So it's just be patient in this whole process, because there's obviously, like you said, there's probably a lot also going on with them. They might not also be in the mood. They might also be putting in that effort that, there could be various different reasons of why this is happening, but it's a problem for us adults as well. So don't feel like it's unique to you.
Yeah, or your child, right? And I think patience is a big thing. Yeah, patience is a big thing. I remember with my eldest, subhanallah, she, Allahumma barik, by the time she was around about 4.5, she'd memorized, mashallah, Allahumma barik, up until Surah At-Takathur. And you can imagine, mashallah, it's quite a large portion. That's about 4 pages of Quran, Allahumma barik, by the time she was around 4.5. And I remember just at this one point, it took us about 3 months to get Surah At-Takathur. It was just going on. And I was saying to my husband, every day we're doing Surah At-Takathur, every day. It was just that, that kalla sawfa ta'lamun, thumma kalla sawfa ta'lamun, kalla law ta'lamun. And she just wasn't getting those 3 ayat. It was just those 3. She was getting so caught up in just like that repetition. She was just getting confused. And mashallah, Allahumma barik, it took us 3 months to get Surah At-Takathur, but she was so little, Allahumma barik as well. So I didn't have any sort of expectation that she was going to, get this in, a day or a week or, even a month, subhanallah. But then after that, it flew by, subhanallah. After that, it was like all of the rest of the surahs, Allahumma barik, it just flew by, and so sometimes there is a bit of a, there might be a growth spurt. There's a lot of stuff that happens with kids, and so sometimes they're just really genuinely maybe struggling with that portion. And you know what, mashallah, I always remind my girls as well, when you struggle with the Quran, there's double reward. There's even 10 times the reward when you're struggling with it. Don't get disheartened, Yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I said I agree. I that's why I remind my son of that as well, because mashallah, he's memorized a good portion of the Quran for his age, and there are times when he struggles with just reading it. So like I said, he's really good at memorizing through listening. So I think he also just does it through listening, even though he uses the Quran pen, because when I tell him to do his daily reading, which is from a portion that he hasn't memorized, he struggles. And I try to remind him of that struggle and how he gets a lot more reward than someone who can recite it properly and recite it clearly and with full tajweed and all of that sort of stuff. So like I said, so I agree with you. It's just reminding them of the the blessings of memorizing Quran and memorizing and having mistakes. It's just taking that step for the sake of Allah. The reward in itself is so great. Like, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And I think they also, if you point it out to them as well, like I think you mentioned earlier that, you know, after your son finishes his portion of the Quran, then there's like a sense of relief sometimes. And I feel like that with my girls as well, that it's like when they finish their Quran, there's kind of that sense of relief. And I have to remind them sometimes that, hey, look,
Yeah.
how nice does it feel now you finished? You know, it feels good, right? It feels nice to have connected with the Quran and to feel closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now you can go about your day, you know? And so I kind of try to remind them daily as well that, like, okay, look, you finish your Quran. Now the hard work is done. Sometimes I feel like that's what I say to them. Like, now the hardest thing that you can do today is finished, you know? So just, you know, and the thing that has the most barakah is over now. Now you can go ahead and go about your business, go do whatever you need to do. Alhamdulillah. And I feel like it's just, you know, being consistent with those reminders as well. There have been times when I have fallen behind on reminding them of that barakah and showcasing that barakah to them. Alhamdulillah. And I think that's one of the things that as mothers we need to try our best to be more consistent with,
Yeah, I
reminding
agree.
them every single day when they're doing the Quran, like, great job, like, it's amazing. How do you I think one thing I've also asked my girls, like, how do you feel now? How do you feel now? You finished your portion of the Quran, you finished your muraja, whatever it is. How do you
Mm.
feel? Like, you know, do you feel a bit lighter? Do you feel a bit happier now it's finished? Like, and majority of the time they say, yeah, I'm happy now it's finished. And
I
so it's
agree with
just
you. And
reminding
I think
them.
we find it hard as parents as well, or I definitely find it hard. I can't really speak for other people. But
No, I do too.
when I'm just really annoyed, I find it really hard. Like I feel like my ego gets the best of me. But at least at some point in that day or night or before he goes to sleep, when I tell them that, you know, it was, you know, I remind my son how I'm so proud of him,
Mm,
that, you know, he's doing something that, you know, he finds difficult because it comes at a time. Sometimes he like everybody else around him is watching TV and he has to go and do his Quran, you know, and I know that it's a sacrifice. I may like shout a whole process before that, but then at some point when I've calmed down, I do remind him that, you know, I'm really proud of him and it's amazing. And it's, you know, I remind him how much of an inspiration he is for other children as well.
yeah, definitely.
Allahumma barik.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. No, seriously, it makes a big difference to them, I think, as children. And I think one of the reasons why, and I've brought this up in other programs before, is that we have this sort of, you know, we never really grew up with that. As far as I did, I never really grew up with that sense of praise when you did things, you know, just that were expected of you. And so that's the thing. Like, I didn't grow up learning Quran, but like generally speaking, you know, just things that were expected of me. There was no praise or I'm proud of you or great job or that's awesome. Like, there was nothing like that for things I was expected to do. So it just kind of, you know, I never grew up doing that. So then to now do it with my kids, it's a learning experience. It's something that I have had to teach myself to do to them. That even if it's something that they are expected to do, that, you know, they should be appreciated for it. They should, you know, feel a sense of, you know, happiness when they do it. And that comes from our praise. It comes from our recognition of them and their hard work, right? I think that's important. Alhamdulillah. So I'm gonna ask you. So we only got a couple minutes left, inshallah. Any last words of wisdom, you know, especially for the mothers who maybe are struggling with motivation themselves, you know, on how to start on this journey? Any sort of tips or tricks, words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Just that you know that your children are an amana. They are entrusted to you by Allah because He knew that you are capable of having them and caring for them. And you may not know it, but you are called to their Quran journey, whether you are part of it by helping them, teaching them how to read Quran, or whether you are facilitating it in any other way, whether it's through getting them a Quran teacher, providing them with the Quran resources and tools at their disposal. At the end of the day, it's about making Quran accessible for them and so that they gravitate towards it, whether it's through these Quran books. My 1-year-old, who's going to be nearly 2, he loves those little sound books. He just plays it. Does he know it's Quran? No, he doesn't. But he picks that up and he plays with it. He's got these puzzles and things. We have loads of amazing Muslim businesses and, you know, Islamic resources that we have access to, that we can use to help us. And also when it comes to your own journey, know that when you see your child memorize the Quran, you're going to want to do it as well. Or when your child reads the Quran, you're going to want to do it. And then they're going to surpass you. And actually, that's one of the greatest feelings ever. The fact that me and my son are competing and he's like way ahead of me now. It's really amazing that I can still be a part of that journey, though, even though I haven't memorized what he's memorized or I don't read what he's read on a daily basis. And as Muslim mothers, we're all busy. We have, we're very busy, whether it's with our kids, whether it's with family, whether it's with work, we're all busy. But if we don't prioritize what's important, then our children will slip away. I mean, we live in the West. The temptation is very, very real.
Sorry, Anjem, I'm going to have to stop you there just because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So I just want to say Jazakallah khairan, Sister Anjem, for coming on. Alhamdulillah. If anybody does want to get in contact with me, please do so on the radio WhatsApp. You can do that on 077-488-55055. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan to all of my guests and for tuning into the homeschooling show. May Allah bless us all with the rest of the days of Ramadan. And please keep me and my family in your du'as. And Eid Mubarak for everyone celebrating either whenever it comes, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Alaikum assalam.